The space station floated in the darkness between three suns. It was called Helix 9, and it was the largest military academy in the known galaxy. Every year, young soldiers from 12 different species came here to train together. They learned to fight side by side. They learned to trust each other. Most importantly, they learned about each other. This year, 200 new cadets arrived on the morning transport ship. They came from worlds of ice and fire, from planets with purple skis and moons with no sky at all. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had so many eyes that counting them would take all day. They walked through the silver halls of the academy with wonder and nervousness on their alien faces. Among them was a human. His name was Park. He was 28 years old, not young by human military standards. He had transferred from Earth's Korean Peninsula Coalition, a region known for producing quiet and disciplined soldiers, was both of these things. He stood at average human height, which made him shorter than most species in the hallway. His black hair was cut short in military style. His eyes were dark and calm, like deep water that hid what was beneath. He walked alone. The other species moved around him with curious glances. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only been traveling between stars for 300 years. To most alien civilizations, this was like yesterday. They had been exploring space for 12,000 years. They had been doing it for 8,000. Humans were bobbies in comparison. But bobbies grew up. The cadets gathered in a massive room called the Observation Theater. It had seats that curved upward like the inside of a bowl, all facing a giant screen that covered the entire front wall. The ceiling was made of glass, showing the stars outside. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Found a seat in the back row. He preferred to watch rather than be watched. A cadet sat 2 seats away from him. There were amphibian creatures with smooth blue skin and large, wet eyes. This one kept glancing at with obvious curiosity. "You are human," they said. It was not a question. "Yes," replied. "I have never met a human before. You are smaller than I expected." Almost smiled. "We get that a lot." Before they could ask more questions, the lights in the theater began to dim. A tall figure walked onto the stage below. She was an species with 4 arms and a hard shell that gleamed like polished metal. Her name was Instructor, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had seen many wars and survived them all. "Welcome, cadets," said. Her voice was strange, a mix of clicks and hums that the translator devices turned into words. "You come from different worlds, different cultures, different histories, but starting today, you are one unit, one force. You will learn to fight together, and perhaps one day you will die together." The room was completely silent. "But first," continued, "you must understand each other. You must learn where your fellow soldiers come from, what made them who they are, what their people have survived." She paused and looked across the rows of young faces. "Today, we begin with humanity." Felt eyes turning toward him. He kept his face empty of expression. A cadet sitting in the middle rows made a chirping sound that meant confusion. There were bird-like creatures with bright feathers and quick movements. "Instructor," she said, "why do we start with humans? They are the youngest species here. They have the least history." "That is exactly why," replied, "because you know the least about them, and because what you are about to see will be educational." She pressed a button on her wrist device. The giant screen came to life with light and color. The first image showed a planet of blue and green floating in black space. "Earth," announced, "of humanity, a small planet in an unremarkable solar system, one sun, one moon, nothing special about its location." She looked at the cadets. "And yet this small planet produced a species that crossed the gap between stars in only 3 centuries. A species that, when they first made contact with us, showed no fear. Do you know why?" Nobody answered. "Because," said slowly, "they had already seen worse than anything we could show them. They had done worse to themselves than we could imagine doing to others." She pressed another button. The screen changed. Now it showed humans in strange clothing from long ago. They were standing in rows holding primitive weapons. Their faces were dirty and tired. Behind them, a city burned. "This is human warfare," said. "We will watch together. We will learn together. And when we are finished, you will understand why every species in this coalition agreed to one rule when humans joined us." The next to leaned forward. "What rule?" His mandibles clicked in what might have been a grim smile. "Never make humanity your enemy." The footage began to play. Watched the familiar images appear on the screen. He had seen this all before in his history classes as a child, but he had never watched it through alien eyes. He looked at the faces around him, soft and hard, scaled and feathered, all watching with innocent curiosity. They had no idea what was coming. Settled deeper into his seat and waited. The education was about to begin. The screen showed a city covered in snow and ash. Buildings had fallen into piles of broken stone. The streets were filled with rubble and frozen bodies. Smoke rose from fires that had been burning for weeks. "This is Stalingrad," instructor said. "A human city. The year was 1942 by their calendar. 2 human nations were fighting for control of this city." A cadet raised her feathered hand. "How many soldiers fought here?" "Over 2 million, replied. The theater went quiet. 2 million was a large number for any species. The footage continued. It showed humans crawling through the ruins, their faces blue from cold, their bodies thin from hunger. They fought room by room, building by building. When one group of soldiers died, another group took their place. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives and bare hands. "How long did this battle last?" the cadet asked. His voice was shaking slightly. 5 months, said. A sound of disbelief rippled through the cadets. 5 months of this, in one city. The final death count, continued, was nearly 2 million, soldiers and civilians combined. The cadet stood up suddenly. Her feathers were pressed flat against her body, a sign of extreme distress. "Instructor, I need to leave." Tilted her head. "The lesson has only just begun." "I understand, but I cannot watch more of this." This voice cracked. 2 million dead in one city, fighting their own kind. She looked around at the other cadets. "Does no one else find this disturbing?" Many heads nodded. Many eyes looked away from the screen. Considered this for a moment, then gestured toward the door. "You may leave, cadet, but know that this curriculum is mandatory. You will need to complete it eventually." The left quickly. 3 other cadets followed her. The footage changed. Now it showed a beach covered with metal obstacles and barbed wire. The water was rough. Ships filled the horizon, more ships than anyone could count. "This is called D-Day," explained. The year was 1944. Human soldiers were trying to take this beach from enemy forces. The enemy had built strong defenses. They had guns pointed at every meter of sand. The humans knew this. They attacked anyway. The footage showed small boats approaching the beach. When the front doors of the boats dropped open, guns immediately started firing. Humans fell by the dozens, by the hundreds, but more kept coming. A cadet clicked his mandibles rapidly. "They are running into certain death. Why do they not retreat?" "They cannot," said. "The order was given, they must take the beach." "But the ones giving orders are safe on the ships. Why do the soldiers obey?" Paused the footage. She turned to look at who was still sitting quietly in the back row. "Lieutenant Park," she said, "perhaps you can explain." Every eye in the theater turned to the human, took a slow breath before speaking. "They obeyed because they believed in something bigger than themselves," he said. His voice was calm and steady. They were fighting against an enemy that had conquered most of their continent, an enemy that was putting millions of innocent people into camps and killing them. The soldiers on that beach knew they might die, but they also knew that if they did not fight, many more would die later. "So they sacrificed themselves," the cadet said slowly, for strangers they had never met. Yes. The theater fell silent again. The footage resumed. The beach ran red with blood. Bodies piled up at the waterline, and still the humans kept coming, wave after wave after wave. Eventually they broke through the defenses. They took the beach. They won. But the cost was terrible. This single battle killed over 10,000 humans in one day, said, and this was considered a victory. 12 more cadets stood up and walked to the door. None of them looked back. The screen changed again. New images appeared, trenches filled with mud and water, humans sitting in those trenches, their eyes empty and haunted, explosions tearing the earth apart. This is the First World War, said. It lasted 4 years. 17 million humans died. They fought over borders and political agreements. They invented new weapons specifically designed to kill each other more efficiently. Poison gas, machine guns, tanks, aircraft that dropped bombs on cities. A cadet vomited on the floor. Medical staff came to help him leave. They create weapons to kill themselves, another cadet whispered. They improve those weapons. They make the killing faster and easier. Yes, confirmed. Humans are very creative when it comes to destruction. The footage showed explosions lighting up the night sky. It showed soldiers charging across open ground into walls of gunfire. It showed young men, some barely old enough to be called adults, dying in mud and wire and blood. By the time paused the footage for a break, 94 cadets had left the theater. Almost half the class was gone. Remained in his seat. He looked at the empty spaces around him. He thought about his grandfather, who had fought in a war that the cadets had not even seen yet. He thought about his grandmother, who had survived bombs falling on her city when she was just a child. He thought about all the wars that humans had fought, all the blood they had spilled, all the lessons they had learned. The aliens around him were afraid. They looked at the human in the back row with new eyes, not the curious eyes from before. These were the eyes of prey realizing they had been sitting next to a predator. Understood their fear, he even respected it. But he also knew something they did not understand yet. Humans were not just destroyers, they were also builders. They broke things, yes, but they also fixed them. They hurt each other, yes, but they also healed each other. The footage showed only half the story. But for now, the cadets only saw the darkness. The light would come later. The break lasted 30 minutes. Some cadets used the time to eat. Others sat in corners with blank faces, staring at nothing. A few gathered in small groups and whispered to each other in their native languages, words that translators could catch, but that carried emotions too deep for any machine to understand. Walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a direction he could not point to from here, was Earth, his home, his people. He wondered what his mother was doing right now, probably working in her small restaurant making soup for customers who would never know that her son was standing on a space station, being watched by aliens like he was some kind of dangerous animal. He felt someone approach. The footsteps were light and clicking, like many small legs moving together. Lieutenant Park. He turned. It was a cadet, smaller than instructor but with the same hard shell and multiple eyes. Her name was. He remembered her from the registration list. Cadet, he said. She stood beside him and looked out at the stars. I have a question. Ask. The footage we watched, the death, the destruction. She paused, her mandibles moving slowly. How do your people live with such memories? Thought about this carefully. It was a good question, maybe the best question anyone had asked today. We write them down, he said finally. We build monuments. We teach our children what happened so they will not repeat the same mistakes, and then we move forward. But do you not feel anger, hatred? The species that fought each other, do they not want revenge? Some do, some always will turn to face her. But most of us learn that revenge only creates more pain. My grandmother watched her city burn when she was 7 years old. Bombs fell from the sky like rain. She lost her parents, her home, everything. The country that dropped those bombs was our enemy. Listened without moving. Today, continued, that country is one of our closest allies. My grandmother has friends from that nation. She drinks tea with them. She laughs with them. They play together. How is that possible? Asked. Her voice carried genuine confusion. After what they did to her people. Because she chose to forgive. Not forget. Never forget, but forgive. Looked back at the stars. Humans are good at many things, Cadet. We are good at killing, but we are also good at healing. Sometimes the healing takes generations. Sometimes it never fully completes, but we try. We always try. Before could respond, a tone sounded through the station. The break was over. It was time to return to the theater. They walked back together in silence. When they entered the theater, noticed that more seats were empty than before. Some cadets had used the break to officially withdraw from the academy. They had submitted their paperwork and taken transport ships back to there. Instructor stood at the front, waiting. Her posture was stiff. Even she seemed affected by the footage, though she tried not to show it. For those who remain, she said, we continue with Part 2 of the Human Warfare curriculum. This section covers what humans call asymmetric warfare, conflicts where one side is much stronger than the other. The screen lit up again. This time it showed jungles, thick and green and hot. Human soldiers moved through the trees, their faces covered in sweat and fear. They were looking for an enemy they could not see. The Vietnam War, explained. A conflict that lasted nearly 20 years. One of the most powerful nations on Earth fought against a much smaller nation. The powerful nation had better weapons, more soldiers, more resources. By all logical measures, they should have won easily. The footage showed explosions tearing through the jungle, helicopters filling the sky, bombs falling in endless waves. They lost, said. A gasp moved through the remaining cadets. The smaller nation used tactics that did not follow the rules of traditional warfare. They hid among civilians. They built tunnels underground. They attacked quickly and then disappeared. They refused to fight in open battles where they would be destroyed. Paused. They fought for 20 years. They lost millions of their own people, and they never surrendered. The screen showed a young human fighter, maybe 17 years old, holding a weapon that looked older than he was. He was smiling at the camera like he had already won. This is impossible, a cadet said. No species can sustain such losses and keep fighting. The psychological damage alone would break them. And yet humans did it, replied, many times in many wars. The footage changed to show mountains covered in snow. Different humans, different time, same stubborn refusal to surrender. This is Afghanistan. Over the course of human history, 3 different major powers tried to conquer this region. 3 different empires with superior technology and numbers. All 3 failed. The humans who lived in these mountains fought against tanks with old rifles. They fought against aircraft with weapons from the previous century. And they won. Every time. Another cadet stood up. This one was a species with skin and 4 arms. They were known for their logical minds and calm emotions, but this one was shaking. I formally withdraw from the academy, he announced. His voice was flat, but his body betrayed his fear. I cannot serve alongside a species that behaves this way. If this is what they do to each other, there is no limit to what they might do to us. He walked to the door. 6 other cadets followed him. Watched them go. Then she looked at the remaining cadets, counting silently. 106 remained from the original 200. Does anyone else wish to leave? She asked. No one moved. Very well, turned back to the screen. Then let us continue. There is much more to learn about humanity. The footage resumed. More wars, more death, more impossible survival against terrible odds. Watched it all with the same calm expression he had worn since the beginning. He knew these stories. He had grown up with them. They were part of his blood, his history, his identity. But now, watching them through alien eyes, he began to understand something he had never considered before. Humans were terrifying. Not because they were strong, not because they were fast, not because they had special powers or advanced technology. They were terrifying because they never stopped. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, no matter how much logic said they should give up. Humans kept fighting until they won or until every last one of them was dead. And sometimes, even death was not enough to stop them. Their ideas lived on. Their causes lived on. Their children picked up the weapons of their parents and continued the fight. For the first time, felt a strange pride mixing with his sadness. His people were monsters, but they were also survivors. And maybe, just maybe, those two things were connected. The second break came after 3 more hours of footage. By then, the theater felt like a graveyard. Empty seats stretched across the rows like missing teeth. The cadets who remained sat far apart from each other, as if they needed space to process what they had seen. Walked to the food dispensers near the back of the station. He was not hungry, but he needed to move. Sitting still for so long made his muscles tight and his mind heavy. He ordered a simple meal. Rice and vegetables, the closest thing to Korean food the alien machines could produce. It tasted wrong, but it was familiar enough to bring a small comfort. Found him again. The cadet had not left his mind since their earlier conversation. She was one of the few aliens who looked at him with curiosity instead of fear. "May I sit with you?" she asked. Gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Please." She sat down carefully, folding her 4 arms in front of her. She had not taken any food, perhaps did not eat during stressful times, or perhaps she had simply lost her appetite. "I stayed," she said. "I wanted you to know that. I noticed. Many of my people would think I am foolish." The cadet was right. Logic says that humanity is dangerous. Logic says we should fear you. She paused. But I do not think logic is enough to understand your species. Set down his eating utensils. What do you think is enough? I do not know yet. That is why I stayed, to learn. Leaned forward slightly. Lieutenant Park, the footage showed us death. It showed us destruction. It showed us that humans can endure suffering beyond what any species should survive. But it did not show us why. Why what? Why you keep fighting? Why you never surrender? Why you will die by the millions for causes that outsiders cannot understand? Her compound eyes reflected the distant stars through the window. There must be something driving you, some force inside your species that we cannot see. Was quiet for a long moment. This was not an easy question to answer. He was a soldier, not a philosopher, but he tried anyway. "Do you know what makes humans different from most species in the galaxy?" he asked. "You are more violent." "Yes, but that is not the real difference." Pushed his tray aside. "The real difference is that we evolved as prey." Tilted her head. "I do not understand. The footage showed humans as predators, the most efficient predators your planet ever produced. We became that, but we did not start that way." His voice grew softer, as if he was sharing a secret. "Millions of years ago, our ancestors were small and weak. They lived in trees because the ground was too dangerous. Everything wanted to eat them. Large cats, wolves, snakes, birds. The world was full of things with claws and teeth and poison, and our ancestors had none of those." "How did you survive?" "We became clever. We learned to work together. We made tools from sticks and stones. We developed languages so we could warn each other of danger, and most importantly, we developed fear." Met her eyes directly. "Humans are afraid of everything, Cadet. We are afraid of the dark, afraid of heights, afraid of deep water, afraid of strangers. These fears kept us alive when we were prey. They made us careful. They made us paranoid." "But you are no longer prey." "No, we are not, but the fear never left us. It is still there, deep in our minds, telling us that danger is everywhere, that we must fight to survive, that we must never, ever stop fighting because the moment we stop, something will kill us. Process this slowly, so your violence comes from fear. Partly, but there is another side to it. Its expression softened slightly. The same fear that makes us fight also makes us love. We know how easily life can be taken away. We know how quickly everything can end. So we hold on to each other. We build families, communities, nations. We create art and music and stories. We do these things because we know that one day we will die and we want to leave something behind. The footage did not show any of that. No, it showed our worst moments, our darkest hours, but those moments do not exist alone. Leaned back in his chair. For every war there was a peace that followed. For every enemy there was an eventual friend. For every destroyed city there was a rebuilt one, often more beautiful than before. Was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, more thoughtful. The others left because they fear what humanity might do to them, she said. Yes. They see you as a threat. We are a threat. I will not pretend otherwise. But you are also something else, stood up slowly. You are survivors. You face your own darkness and somehow come out the other side. You break yourselves and then put the pieces back together. Nodded, that is what we do. I want to understand how. I want to learn why your species chooses to rebuild instead of simply continuing to destroy. She straightened her posture, a gesture of formal respect in culture. Will you teach me, Lieutenant Park? The question surprised him. He had expected fear. He had expected suspicion. He had not expected a request for mentorship. I am just a soldier, he said. So was every human in that footage. Soldiers, farmers, factory workers, children, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. His mandibles clicked in what was beginning to recognize as a smile. I think that is the most frightening thing about your species. Your heroes are not born special. They are made by circumstance. Any one of you could become what we saw on that screen. Considered her words. She was right in a way. Humans did not have a warrior caste or a special genetic line of fighters. Any human, given the right circumstances, could become either a monster or a hero. Sometimes both. I will teach you what I can, he said finally. But I warn you, Cadet, the more you learn about humans, the less simple we will seem. We are not easy to understand. Nothing worth understanding is easy, replied. The tone sounded again. The break was over. They walked back to the theater together, human and predator, and the remaining cadets watched them enter with mixed expressions. The final part of the lesson was about to begin, and everything was about to change. The theater felt different now. The empty seats were no longer just absences. They were statements. Nearly half the original class had decided that serving alongside humans was too dangerous to consider. They had seen enough. They had made their choice. But 106 cadets remained. Instructor stood at the front of the room, looking older somehow. The day had been long, and even she seemed tired. Her usual confidence had faded into something quieter, more thoughtful. We have reached the end of the mandatory curriculum, she announced. You have seen the history of human warfare. You have learned what this species is capable of. Before we conclude, does anyone have questions? Silence filled the room. The remaining cadets looked at each other, then at the floor. No one wanted to speak first. Then stood up. Every eye turned to him. The human in the back row. The quiet soldier who had watched his own species' horrors without flinching. The one the aliens had been stealing glances at all day, trying to understand how someone could carry such history inside them. Permission to address the class, instructor, he said. Hesitated. This was not part of the lesson plan, but something in his voice made her nod. Granted, Lieutenant Park. Walked down the steps toward the front of the theater. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. When he reached the stage, he turned to face the cadets. Behind him, the giant screen still showed the frozen image of a battlefield. "You watched us kill each other," he said. His voice was calm but carried to every corner of the room. "You saw our worst moments, battles that lasted months, wars that lasted decades, weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. You saw humans starving, freezing, bleeding, dying, and you were afraid." No one disagreed. "Good," continued. "You should be afraid. Humans are dangerous. We know exactly how much damage we can cause because we have caused it to ourselves, over and over and over again. We have burned our own cities, poisoned our own land, killed our own children. There is no limit to human destruction when we choose to destroy." A cadet shifted uncomfortably. His feathers rustled with tension. "But here is what the footage did not show you." Turned and pressed a button on the console. The screen changed. Now it showed something different. A city rising from rubble. Humans working together, clearing debris, building new structures with their bare hands. The same city that had been destroyed in the war footage from earlier, now shining and whole. "This is the same city that burned in the footage from 1945, said. 80 years later, it was one of the most advanced cities on our planet. The people who survived the fire did not give up. They rebuilt everything, and they made it better." The screen changed again. Now it showed two men shaking hands. One wore the uniform of a nation that had once been an enemy. The other wore civilian clothes. These two men fought on opposite sides of a war that killed millions. 20 years later, they stood together at a ceremony for peace. They grew up as friends. Paused. "This is what humans do. We break things. Then we fix them. We hate each other. Then we forgive each other. We fight until there is nothing left. Then we build something new from the ashes." The cadets watched in silence. Some had expressions of confusion. Others looked thoughtful. A few seemed moved in ways they did not fully understand. "Every species in this coalition has been conquered at some point in their history," continued. "They were enslaved by the for 300 years. They almost went extinct during the cluster wars. They fought civil wars that lasted generations." He looked at briefly. "You all have darkness in your past. You all have ancestors who suffered and died." He stepped forward, closer to the seats. "Humans are no different except for one thing." His voice dropped lower. "We were never conquered by anyone except ourselves. We had no outside predators to fear, so we became our own predators. We had no external enemy to unite against, so we fought each other. For thousands of years, humans killed humans, and somehow we survived." The screen behind him now showed Earth from space, the blue and green planet spinning slowly in the darkness. "When we finally reached the stars and discovered the coalition, we had a choice. We could have seen you as new enemies, new targets, new species to conquer and destroy." Eyes moved across the room, meeting the gazes of the cadets who remained. "We chose not to. We chose trade instead of war, diplomacy instead of invasion, alliance instead of conquest. Not because we had to, not because we were forced to, but because we decided that we were tired of destruction." He let that sink in. The cadets who left today understood something important. They understood that humans are terrifying, that we are capable of violence beyond imagination, that we never stop fighting once we start. The expression softened slightly. But the cadets who stayed will learn something more important, something the others will never understand. "What is that?" asked from her seat. Turned to look at her directly. "That humans chose you as friends. We looked at the galaxy filled with strangers and we decided to trust you, to work with you, to protect you." His voice hardened again. "And there is nothing in this universe more valuable than having humanity on your side, because you have now seen what we do to our enemies. Imagine what we would do for our friends." The theater was completely silent. Then slowly, Instructor stepped forward. The tall looked at the human soldier with new eyes, eyes that held something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. "Lieutenant Park," she said. Her voice was quiet. In all my years of teaching this curriculum, I have never had a human speak to the class directly. I did not expect this. With respect, instructor, replied. I did not expect to watch half my future colleagues run away in terror. A few of the remaining cadets made sounds that might have been laughter or surprise. The tension in the room shifted, becoming something lighter. His mandibles clicked in what now recognized as amusement. You make a fair point. She turned to the class. Cadets, today's lesson is concluded. Report to the training halls tomorrow at 600. We have much work ahead of us. The cadets began to stand and gather their things, but many of them paused to look at as they left. Their expressions had changed. The fear was still there, yes, but now it was mixed with something else. Curiosity, interest, perhaps even a strange kind of admiration. Was the last to approach him. She stood before him with her 4 arms folded, her compound eyes reflecting the light from the screen. You spoke well, she said. I spoke truth, replied. Yes, nodded slowly. I think I am beginning to understand your species, Lieutenant. You are not simply violent, you are passionate. Everything you do completely. War, peace, love, hate. You throw yourselves into life with no holding back. Consider this. That is a good way to put it. I look forward to serving with you. Extended one of her hands in the human gesture she had clearly studied. And I look forward to learning more about humanity. The real humanity, not just the darkness but the light as well. Took her hand and shook it. Her grip was strong, her shell cool against his skin. The light cannot exist without the darkness, he said. That is another thing humans have learned. We know our capacity for evil because we have seen it. And because we have seen it, we also know our capacity for good. They are 2 sides of the same coin. Approached them as the last cadets left the theater. Lieutenant Park, she said, I would like to add something to the curriculum. A new section to be taught after the warfare footage. I believe you would be the best person to teach it. Raised an eyebrow. What would you call this section? Looked at the screen, which still showed Earth floating in space. Then she looked back at the human soldier who had changed her understanding of his species in a single day. I would call it the choice, she said. The moment when humanity decided to stop being monsters and start being something else, something better. Nodded slowly. I would be honored to teach it, he said. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere among them, Earth spun on, carrying its billions of humans through space and time. Humans who had fought wars and made peace, who had destroyed and rebuilt, who had hated and loved with equal passion. And now, one of them stood on a space station, ready to teach the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. Not just the darkness, but also the light.